What's up, everyone? Welcome to a very special episode of a crossover between Respawn Aim Fire, the Kick-Ass Irreverent Gaming Podcast, brought to you by Affable, and the JK Games Podcast. If you're watching us right now on twitch.tv/JK Games Podcast, and you're like, who the hell are these hooligans? Oh, we curse on JK Games Podcast, right?
Yes,
it's fine. Can I say the double hockey sticks?
You can say whatever you want.
All right, I'm going to say hail, yeah, that's badass, everyone. Welcome to JK Games Podcast. If you're watching us on Twitch, we're friends, and we're over here. We're taking over your stream for the day, and we are talking spoilers. Hardcore spoilers that would make your Catholic school teacher blush. Do not listen to this if you have not played through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and would not like to be spoiled on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Or any other movie that involves spoilers, because we'll spoil those too. Did you know that Rosebud is the sled? Did you know that, I don't know, the Half-Blood Prince was Ron or something? I don't know.
Oh my god, it was Snape.
Was
Do you
it?
even care?
Whoa, shit.
Yeah, it was Snape.
Chad, why are you spoiling it for me?
Oh my gosh. So everyone, we'll go ahead and to give you time to click away, we'll do some introductions. Hi, I'm Chad Michael Innes. I am co-host of Respawn Aim Fire, the Kick-Ass Irreverent Gaming Podcast. We have here our other co-host, Alex. Look at those headphones squishing on your ears. Cozina, how are you?
Thank you. I appreciate you pointing out my headphones. I've had these for like a couple of months now, but I wanted a new set of headphones that would contrast a little bit better against the dark basement that I'm in. And so, yeah, I very much appreciate that.
You're welcome. I knew that was in I read your diary, and it said in there, no one's talked about my headphones, and I've been wearing them for a couple months now, and I wish they would. So, sorry for reading your diary. You're welcome for making you feel good. Jerica, look at all those lights back there and all those knickknacks. Hannah from JK Games Podcast, how are you?
I'm doing great. So excited that I finally get to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with my friend Kyle over here. Brought him along.
Thank you.
He's been on a couple of episodes of JK Games. Sorry, I introduced you way too early. But I will say, I've pushed we've been planning a spoilercast, a little bit here and there, and unfortunately had to push that. I think I canceled on you twice, maybe at least once. Could have been twice.
Who knows?
It don't matter.
Regardless,
Chad reached out to me, and I was like, okay, perfect timing. And then just more people I can ask questions about, because I've never played the original at all. So I'm glad we have some experts in this room. I think
we have a wonderful continuum of expert levels.
Okay, cool.
From novice to hopefully Kyle's going to fill in some gaps for the rest of us on the other end of the spectrum. Speaking of Kyle, we have here friend of JK Games Podcast and now friend of me, Kyle. Do a little ditty, made S rank on all those piano segments of this game. Cosper, how are you, Kyle?
Yeah. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I love Final Fantasy VII and the remakes so far, so I'm very excited to be able to talk about them today.
I'm excited to have you here because you said in the text messages before this that you have some thoughts about the ending, and I watched 3 videos about the ending and still have no concrete thoughts on the ending, so I'm hoping that you can clear some stuff up. All right, this is our last chance. Spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'll let you leave now.
And
for those of you who stuck around,
spoilers.
For those of you who stuck around and want to know less about the Half-Blood Prince, you'll be in luck. We're no longer spoiling more about Half-Blood Prince. But we've also decided we are not spoiling anything that has happened in the original game past the events of Rebirth. So if you have not played, we're not going to spoil anything that could possibly happen in part 3 of this trilogy. We didn't really talk about Advent Children. Are we gonna bring up anything from Advent Children, you think?
Is that the movie?
The movie? Yeah.
It is the movie.
I started watching it and I was like, hold on a second. I feel like I shouldn't be watching this yet.
I think it's a safe watch. It's not a very great watch. It's a safe watch.
I saw that movie for the first time earlier this year. Fantastic. Utterly fantastic. And by that I mean pretty rough in spots, but thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, if you're a big fan of it's
in terms of spoilers, I mean, I don't feel like there's nothing in that movie that I feel is especially relevant to some of the thematic content we have to discuss today. So I don't think we need to bring it in here.
Okay.
Cool. All right, let's start. I have a general flow. This is the first time I've ever like come prepared in this way to a spoiler chat or like a review discussion at all. So I have a flow that we don't necessarily have to stick to. It can be very kind of loosey-goosey here, but I want to start by just kind of getting an idea of everyone's history with Final Fantasy, and then also specifically Final Fantasy VII. And we'll start with you, Kyle, since you are the most enigmatic to me.
All right, so my history of Final Fantasy is weird and very unlike most people's, because I never played a Final Fantasy game until 15. Ooh. And I actually really liked it.
What was it about 15 specifically that brought you in? Like, what made you say, Florence and the Machine did that song? I want to play that game.
I was literally going to say the same thing. Stand by me.
Right. No, it was definitely not the combat. The music, though, aside the Florence and the Machine thing, yeah, that's fine. But the general soundtrack, the world, the enemy design, all of that was brand new to me. And so I'd never seen these kind of creatures before. I had never played a game quite like that before. And it was just super interesting to me. And then I played the others or some of the others and found that they were a lot better. But for a first impression, yeah, it was great.
Dope. And then Final Fantasy VII in particular, is that something you have a lot of experience with?
Now, yes, because I've played it a bunch. I've played the original, I think, 2 or 3 times through. I think two times, and then I started a third one. But the way I got into that was it had been a few years since I'd played 15, because I played it years after it came out even. And I saw the demo go up. I played the demo. I was instantly hooked. I like, this is the best thing ever. And so what I did was I played through the original game before Remake came out. I played up to, I think, right after Remake ends, like right after you get out of Midgar. And then I was like, all right, that's going to be where Remake stops. I'm going to stop there. And then I'm going to play Remake and then finish the original. And that's what I did. And I loved it. It was fantastic.
That's awesome. Jerica, I feel like you're on the other side of the spectrum, maybe from Kyle, in terms of like exposure to and familiarity with now Final Fantasy. Tell me about it.
So my first Final Fantasy game was 10, PlayStation 2 era, and that was probably my first JRPG, like turn-based game I ever played in my life, because I didn't play anything prior to that. That's why I haven't played 7 original, because I was too busy playing baby games at the time, like Spyro, which is not a baby game, but I was like, I can't handle this is too much to read. But at the time, I just didn't really know what it was, but this character looked cool, and I liked the art. I liked Pokemon, and that was sort of like anime, and I was like, maybe I'll like this. Looks like it's like Pokemon. But yeah, I got really into it. Really wild story. It's goofy. It's silly. I think that's what attracts me most to Final Fantasy games. It could be really serious, but just next chapter could just be so goofy, or the next scene is it really entertaining. And like turn-based gameplay, I'm usually not like a huge fan of, but I had enough fun in 10 at least to keep going and play whatever comes next. And then I played 10-2. I'm pretty sure that's how I figured out I was a lesbian. There's a lot of ladies in that game. A lot of beautiful women everywhere. I'm like, oh. So, and then I played 13, never finished it. 14's
That's because Lightning was gone, right? Did you know Lightning returns? Yeah. You could have kept going.
I didn't know she left, and yeah, maybe I revisit that one day. Also, voice actress for Liara from Mass Effect, Allie Hillis. Great voice in that game. Lightning, yeah. Didn't play 14. That's an online game, right? Yep.
Yeah.
15. Never got to it, so I don't know. Kyle, I trust your opinion. Maybe I should try it sometime. And then 16. I have played 16, and it's been my favorite, newest Final Fantasy game. Unless I play 15 and realize, oh my god, this is it. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, great. Alex, this is where I feel like I don't know anything about where you are in this. So tell me
Really?
about, I'm sure you've said it on the podcast before, but I don't even listen to Adam when he recommends games, and then I come back 10 months later, I'm like, oh my god, have you guys played this game? And he's like, yeah, I talked about it 10 months ago. So tell me about your Final Fantasy.
So my Final Fantasy history comes mostly, appreciate you opening the Sunkissed just as I started talking.
Sunkissed Zero Sugar, everyone.
Just as I started talking. So my Final Fantasy history comes mostly from playing the Kingdom Heartses. Way back when, in the year 2008 of our Lord, I got my hands on a secondhand PS2 and I was like, I got to play some new games on this. Went to my local EB Games, because they were called EB Games in Canada at the time, saw a still shrink-wrapped copy of Kingdom Hearts 2 for 20 Canadian dollars. And I was like, I know very little about this, but this seems interesting. Picked it up, brought it home, and that turned into a lifelong addiction. So I have accrued a lot of Final Fantasy knowledge over time, a lot of knowledge of the characters, a lot of knowledge of the aspects of the series, the kinds of spells that various characters wield, weapons, whatnot, from the Kingdom Hearts games. In terms of playing the Final Fantasy games proper, however, the only game with the words Final Fantasy in its title that I have played to completion is, bizarre twist of all time, Final Fantasy XIII. Way back in the day, I was, in addition to the PlayStation 2, very much into the PlayStation 3 ecosystem. A lot of people were like, yeah, Final Fantasy XIII was a bit of a dip. And I can definitely see the problems people have with that particular game. But I saw it through to the end, and it remains a game that's very kind of close to me. Other than that, I've tried over the years to get into a couple of different titles. I played one of the demos for Final Fantasy 15. I played Final Fantasy 13 2. Didn't love it, but I suspect I'll probably get back to that one at some point in the future. And, of course, most recently, when I said earlier that I had not played any other game with Final Fantasy in its title to completion, I was lying. I was a dirty liar, because had also played Final Fantasy VII Remake and as well Rebirth, as we'll get into, to completion. Remake, like many people, picked that up just as the pandemic was going into overdrive in 2020, and that game was my game of the year for that year. I was really charmed by it. Obviously, it has its slow segments and issues, but overall, was very, very pleased with that game. And, nowadays I'm the kind of person that is not exactly prone to go out and drop 100 hours on a new JRPG, which those things seem to come out every week nowadays. But when Rebirth was on the horizon, I was like, well, this is going to be one of my few exceptions to that particular rule. And I know that we are definitely going to get into that in just a bit.
Dope. I didn't realize you were so new to Final Fantasy. Well, aside from Kingdom Hearts.
Right.
Great. My very first exposure to Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII. And it was at a family friend's house, and he was playing it. I must have been 7 at the time, because that's when it came out. He was playing it on his PlayStation 1. He's like, come look at this cool game. And it was the scene where Corneo was in the bedroom with Tifa and Cloud in drag and Aerith, and they were talking about how they were going to squish his balls and smash his balls. And I went and told his mom, hey, your son's playing a game about smushing balls. And he got it taken away. And that was my experience with Final Fantasy VII until probably, 9 years later, when I played it on a PS1, like the little portable PS1. I had an LCD flip-up screen, all that kind of stuff with it. Nice. And I played it to completion there. Between those two times, though, I did have a...
I am curious, after first being exposed to Final Fantasy VII in that manner, what did you walk away from that game thinking it was about? Did you know it was an RPG?
I had no idea. In fact, at that time, I didn't even know what an RPG really was necessarily. I think we've talked about this on the podcast, how Dragon Warrior 3 on the Game Boy Color was my first JRPG and RPG experience. And I was just like, this is amazing. And then afterwards, my brother and I played a bunch of Dragon Warrior and Dragon Quest on our Sega Dreamcast via emulation. But we had never touched Final Fantasy, and it wasn't until that Final Fantasy VII on the PS1 that my uncle had given me when I was probably 16 or 17 that I played that. And then I went back on my PSP and played and eventually the Vita, and played a ton of them. I played like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. We played 9 for a Barf game a few years ago. I played 10 now on the Vita when it came out remastered.
Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, guys. I'm I'm a bigger liar than I said I was earlier, because we also played, Chad, a little game called Stranger of Paradise.
Oh, we
Final
did.
Fantasy
Yes.
Origin on the podcast as well.
Yes.
Oh,
I was going to say, did you ever play Final Fantasy 1? And I realized we kind of did in a way, because that game recaps the plot of Final Fantasy 1, sort of.
I've started Final Fantasy 1 a couple times. I started it on my PSP, and I was like, this is way too slow. And then it came out the Pixel remasters on iOS, and I started playing it on one device, and then I no longer had that device, and then my save file was trapped there for some reason, and the cloud saving wasn't working, and I was like, I'm not going to play the rest of that again. But now that they're out on PlayStation, and I bought the whole collection, and it has trophies, one of these days, we might platinum them all. But then Final Fantasy VII in general, I'm loving the remake. Played that in the pandemic, spent like 70 hours, I think, getting the platinum trophy on that one, which pales in comparison in the time spent on this game in order to get anywhere close to the platinum. I loved remake. I loved the hell out of this game for 150 hours, and will continue to more in when PlayStation 5 Pro comes out and I can do my hard mode run through. I want to learn. Alex has definitely talked about his feelings right now on remake so far. I was all about it and I was super into it. But Jerica and Kyle, just like a brief recount, like what were your feelings after playing remake specifically, and how did that set you up for Rebirth?
Jerica, you can go first.
Oh, okay. As far as like, I didn't know what to expect. I've never played it, so it did. I guess with how it was wrapping up, it did leave me wanting more. And sort of bummed that I had no idea, like, because I don't think at the time we knew there was going to be 3 games. I just knew there's going to be multiple games, and I was just like, we've already waited like years for this one. Like, I hate that I'm sort of like left wanting more, and I don't know where the story is going next. So that was a little bit of a bummer. But playing through it, like, I'm so glad this is happening, because I've always wanted to play this game. I just heard rumblings of a remake through the years, and I'm like, I'm gonna hold off until they actually remake this game. They have to do it. But yeah, I was just like, dang it, how many years are we gonna have to wait for at least the next part of the game? So, and I don't know, at the time I didn't know how much was left. So, loved remake.
Yeah, same. I'd always heard ever since I'd played 15, everyone's like, you got to go play 7 or 8 or 9, but 7 was the one I heard the most, and it was one I had always wanted to play. But I knew there was like, for like 8 years or something, there was like some remake in the works, and so I was like, well, I'll just wait and I'll play it then. Playing it that way, right after having played through the same section on the OG, was super interesting. I thought it was a very good, like, faithful recreation of a lot of the moments. There are a lot of pacing issues in that game, but the highs in that game are some of the best I've ever experienced. Whether it's music, boss fights, the cinematics, everything. It's presented and done so well, even compared to the other Final Fantasy games I've played. It's just on a completely different level, I think. It's kind of an uneven ride, but the highs, I would say the highs are sometimes even better than the highs in Rebirth are.
That's a great transition to like Rebirth, y'all. What'd you think? General thoughts, because we'll dive into like some specific things later, but like,
sure.
How'd it go?
I want to kick things off by saying that I really enjoyed my time with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as I was playing it, but I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't more than a little frustrated by the game's drip feed approach to giving you new information, as well as, I guess, just sort of how reactive the characters are in the game's plot as opposed to active. So much of the game is, I guess the cloaked individuals are moving on to a new location, might as well follow them. And you really, the whole time, just want them to have some sort of breakthrough, want them to start like tactfully analyzing the situation they're in and start thinking more strategically about how they can go about stopping Sephiroth and save the world. And the game really does not relent in that regard. And the game definitely also just, in general, has some of these same kind of pacing issues that the original Final Fantasy VII Remake had. And combined with that, a lot of open world content that I enjoyed. Like, I'm not here to bring on the hate for Chadley. I don't know where everyone else stands on that. I suppose we'll get into it.
Chadley.
But when I beat the game, I definitely was in a state of like, man, as much as I enjoyed my time with this, there's just so much for me to go back and 100% complete. And it's all fairly delicious, but like, I'm just not compelled to do so. And for that reason, I still have my Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Platinum just waiting for me to eventually get back to it. I do want to say very quickly, I just recently, just this weekend, started playing Metaphor Re Fantasio. I don't know how it's actually pronounced. I didn't watch a lot of footage of the game in the lead up to its release because I wanted to go into it relatively blind. And there have been a few people on Twitter that I've seen that are like, man, Final Fantasy, or rather Metaphor Re Fantasio, fully delivers on a lot of things that I was really missing out of FF7 Rebirth. It's totally the better game. I'm very early on in the game, and so I'm not at a point where I can definitively say, yes, this is absolutely the better game. Obviously, both are very different in a lot of regards. They have very different objectives, very different gameplay. One is turn-based, the other one is real-time. What I will say is, from the onset, Metaphor definitely is, I think, the much more superior experience in terms of delivering on the things that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did not deliver on, which is having the characters of its story be a lot more active, taking charge of the game's plot on a kind of lot more active level instead of just reacting to where the cloaked individuals are going next. And also, going back to what I said right at the beginning, just having like a much more consistent feed of information, a much more kind of consistent pace at which new events are kind of brought to light, new things happen that kind of progress and further the plot and your understanding of the world and lore of the game. But that is all that I will say on the matter for now.
Jerica, what's up?
I hated Chadley. He can go cut his legs off and never come back ever again. I hope
I'm gonna
he's
go tell your mom.
Please.
I'm not going to defend Chadley, by the way. I'm not here to be the Chadley defense force. I just didn't.
I hate him so much. Overall impressions, I'm so glad this game exists. It's, once again, I knew a little bit of what like big areas that we were going to see in Rebirth based on what I've read online as far as like how much more open it is. And that was like a big thing for the original, like just how much landscape you can explore, which for a PlayStation 1 game, it's not too much, but it was pretty impressive, I think, for its time. But yeah, there was a lot in the game that I feel like, because I haven't played the original, that maybe I was like, well, was this actually in the game, or did they need to put this in here? I'm thinking, I can't remember all the areas, but there's like the deserty area when you're like in the cart with Barrett and Yuffie, I think, and like shooting the boxes. And I was like, was this in the original game? Like, did this need to be in the game? There's a lot of moments that I'm like, does this need to be in this game, or did they spend resources adding this to it? Because there were moments, like, as far as the story goes, like, I'm enjoying where it's going. I love all the little moments. You have the characters. I love the card game. I can't think of the name right now.
Oh my gosh, Queen's Blood.
Yes.
I played so much Queen's. I played more of that
good.
probably than the actual game, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna get into this card game, and there I got into it really quickly. But there's just a lot of stuff. The game is jam-packed full of mini games, and I think that was probably one of the most critiques I listened to, like most people had in common with, was like, oh, there's a lot of mini games, and I just don't know. For my perspective, I don't know if that is just a remake. They are trying to be true to the original, and I love that they put all this stuff in here. But man, I'm sure it took them a long time. I don't know. It was like 3 or 4 years until between this and remake, I think.
What was
feel
it?
like that's
I
about.
think it was just under 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
April
That's
2020,
still really
I think was the first
impressive
one.
that they were able to put this out so soon with all of that stuff in the game. But gameplay, I've never been like a huge, oh my god, I love Final Fantasy gameplay. Like I usually put on easy or whatever I can. I'm just here for the ride, the story. I can put my, I almost called them mana balls. What are they called again?
Materia.
Let me put my mana balls in my sword and my cuffs. Put one back here. Why not? That should do something. So I can get different abilities or whatever. So obviously, I'm not an expert at the gameplay, but I'm here for the story. And there was a lot in this game that overall, like, I'm just glad it exists. It was wacky. I loved having Audrey, my girlfriend, like, watch me play because she did not know what she was in store for. And it was just a wild time because you just couldn't expect what was going to happen next. But yeah, that's like my overall impressions.
Kyle, what about your thoughts on Rebirth?
I think Rebirth is a much better game overall than Remake. It's hard to compare them because they're very different. Like one's open world, one's very linear, but I think it's a much more consistent game. Like I said before, I actually think some of the highs in Remake kind of surpassed some of the highs in Rebirth for me. But I think it's a lot smoother of a ride. There are pacing issues in it. There, even weirdly enough, it kind of has the opposite issue that Remake does in some scenes where it kind of feels like you need to have room to breathe on some of the events that are happening, like when Dine and Barrett's scene when Dine dies, and then you have this like crazy slapstick comedy boss like bust in and he's slapping his butt and trying to insult you and stuff. Right afterwards, like, give us a second to process some of this. You're throwing so much at us at one time. But I think a lot of that pacing and the parts where it feels like it's too spread out, a lot of that kind of comes from the original game. I can't remember. I would love to remember which article or which news site I read it on. They were talking about how a lot of the old 90s and early 2000s JRPGs were very D&D inspired. And so they often had these very like meandering middle sections where you were just going to towns and it was very vibes based. Like you're just going there to experience the world. There's not a lot of story happening. And this second entry in the series kind of takes place in that part of the original remake, the original FF7, where you're just kind of getting introduced to the world. You're going and you're exploring and seeing what you can do and what you can't do. And it's not easy to make that into a very focused beginning, middle, end story, and they did a pretty good job with it. But yeah, it definitely leaves a weird sense of pace when you're going through it for the first time.
I love the D&D comparison because in my head I'm just imagining Tetsuya Nomura being the dungeon master of this whole party, and he's like, all right, and now you're off on a quest to kill Sephiroth. What do you choose to do next? And they're like, well, there's this beach town. Can we hang out in this beach town for the next couple of hours? And he's like, well, I shouldn't, as a good DM, I shouldn't curtail your, decision making and, creativity, but fuck.
But I will require you to get a bathing suit if you're going to go to this beach town.
Yeah, you better have a bathing suit on if you do it.
I kind of agree with you. This game is such an interesting game that there's not a lot that happens in the source material, the original Final Fantasy VII. Like, between you get out of Midgar, which was the end of Remake, to the end of this game, which is the temple and Aerith's death. Surprise, spoilers, yeah. Like, there's not a lot going on story-wise in there. And to then have an entire game that is, if you do everything in it, double the length of the original.
Yeah.
It is double the length of the original remake, not necessarily the original game. It is really difficult to, like, not a lot of story to tell in a ton of time. So I think where they were successful was telling, like, there were a lot of little stories. We got a lot of character development. We got, you mentioned Barrett and Dine. We got Aerith and her origin. We got Yuffie and some of her stuff. So I think that's what makes this not well paced, but not poorly paced, but just like differently paced than your average game. There's not a giant narrative thread that you're following really throughout this, that you're feeling like, oh my God, if I'm going into the beach and I have to get a bathing suit and then I have to go talk to this guy who's slapping his butt everywhere. Like none of that, you're feeling like, I can't be doing this right now because I have to go follow these black cloaked people to some random destination that I don't know what is at the end of. So yeah, it's different. Whereas you kind of made the comparisons to Remake too, Kyle, where Remake definitely had it's very linear. I know where I'm going and my objective in this. And then you had those fucking stupid puzzles where you know how to get from one end of the junkyard to the other one, but they're going to make you go and control the stupid robot hands so slowly just to like that kind of stuff. I didn't feel like was in this one as much.
Right.
But it was definitely, you have those moments where you're thrown into, you have your choice of 1,000 things that are more engaging than the robot hands, but kind of serve the same purpose as the robot hands of like, let's slow down if we get through all the story, you'll be done in 2 hours. So let's slow this down and give you a ton of stuff to do.
It didn't feel as much like intentional padding because a lot of it was optional.
Right.
Whereas in Remake, you were being they're pumping the brakes on you hard, like trying to slow you down so that you have time, to make this a long game. In this one, I just feel like there's a ton of optional stuff that can bog you down if you get caught up into it too much.
Yeah.
I can't believe how much game is in this game.
So much game.
There's so much. Whenever I thought I was getting to the end, I'm like, all right, I'm going to finish it tonight. And Audrey would be like, okay, let's watch. And it would just, I thought I was done. And I definitely played for like 4 more nights.
I knew what was going to happen. And I still thought I was done a couple times. I was like, oh man, that last chapter or two, that goes on.
Yeah, I remember hitting the point of no return. And I was like, all right, here we go. We'll wrap this up tonight. And they're like, nope, surprise, there's 7 more hours of content.
Surprise, 4-hour dungeon.
Simultaneously, one of the game's best moments, but also one of its most daunting moments is when you get access to the boat version of the Highwind.
Oh my word,
and you realize that all of the areas that you've been traveling to and from in the game are not siloed off separate areas, but in fact are part of a single interconnected open world. And there's like a bunch of shit for you to discover in like the gaps in the sea in between all those areas. Like this game, it keeps going and going and going in that regard.
And that's really interesting because it felt to me like a callback to the original. One of the things in the original game is and Alex, have you played the original game?
No, I don't know.
So in the original game, you basically play the overworld like a globe. Like you keep going one direction, you will eventually come back to the spot you started. It plays out like a globe, and seeing that get expanded over time in the original and realizing you can literally circumnavigate the whole planet is one of like the big wow factors of that original game, because it was in the 90s. And I felt like that was a very similar moment they recreated when you get in the boat and you realize, oh, I can cross the ocean, like literally drive across the ocean to the other continent. I thought it was so cool. It was a very cool moment for me. It felt like I was playing that original game again.
I also loved that. I remember Jerica texted me and said, hey, I don't want to spoil anything, but I want to let you know kind of where I am. Does the word tiny bronco mean anything to you? And I wasn't at that point in the game yet, but I'd played the original. I was like, oh yeah, that busted ass plane that you ride around in. And at that point, I realized now, looking back, I was like, oh fuck, that was a spoiler for Jerica, because in this game, it wasn't a busted ass plane. Like it was literally how you got from place to place. But then, of course, they wrap it up with, like, here's a callback to the original. Like, yeah, it's a busted-ass plane now that you can only go up rivers and stuff like that. And so I think that was a really cool, like, adaptation as a way to work that into this one, but make it a little bit more modern. Jerica and Alex, as people who haven't played the original, obviously you don't have a lot of knowledge of, like, what are the changes and how do you feel about them? So I'm curious your point of view on the story of this game in particular, not knowing how it ends necessarily. Unless you might have spoiled yourself on how it ends, Alex. But
I do want to come clean that in the lead up to Rebirth's release, I may or may not have watched a bunch of video overviews of the original game story.
Fair.
There was a like Final Fantasy VII mobile title that was receiving new updates called, was it The First Soldier? That it was basically telling the story. There's this guy that shows up at various points throughout the campaign that offers advice to Rufus. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The guy in the cloak. Basically, it was like going over his story. So yeah, I got pretty into the story of like the compilation of Final Fantasy VII. So I do
we see
know
at the end that guy, isn't he a Sephiroth clone?
Yeah.
In essence, yes. I do want to
kind of.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't like go and watch like the last few episodes of his mobile game, so I don't know what's going on with him, but I'm pretty sure that yes, he is dead and it's just Sephiroth.
He also, for the record, never shows up in anything else Final Fantasy VII related other than that mobile game, I'm pretty sure.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he is a new character from that. Yep.
Wow.
Pretty inconsequential though, I think.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
There were people that were predicting online. I don't know if we should get into spoilers about the mobile game, but people were saying that he could be Cloud's father because they were making all these allusions to like him apparently giving his friends like 20 Jill and Cloud saying something similar about his own father. I don't really buy it though.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I hope not.
No.
So, Jerica, the story of this game, I have my own thoughts about how someone might view the story of this, because to me, it's really cool, and I had a lot of knowledge, like, oh, this is calling back to that, or this, oh, I can't wait to see how they do this. And so I was really engaged the whole time, but I'm making assumptions that someone who doesn't know is coming might just be lost and completely disengaged from it. Was that the case for you?
I'm just trying to remember because I might know more about this game than I thought, and I can't remember if it was in this game or if this is just something I knew before. Like, I knew that there was a major death in this game, and we can say it now. Like, I knew because that was just such a big thing, like pop culture, gaming. So I knew that would happen, but ever since like I realized like playing Remake, I'm like, oh, they're changing the story a little bit. Like things might be different, and oh, they are a little different. But then playing Rebirth, honestly, like I couldn't tell you what was changed or what hasn't been changed. Just because like, yeah, I haven't played the original. I just know like some backstory for Cloud is all I know. I just know he was a part of a situation but doesn't remember things. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, is this some of the things he's experiencing, like they're keeping secrets from him? I feel like that's really rude. Like, they're not talking to him directly, which was really confusing to me, because I'm like, if you really care about Cloud, y'all seem like both of these women want to date him, but y'all are not asking about his feelings. No one's taking him to get help. He needs a therapist. So that's also really weird to me, because I'm like, well, maybe it's just the goofiness of the story where they're not actually talking through the conflict and what's happening. Like, they're just letting Cloud lead them into this mess, and he's got something going on with him. So I thought that took me out of it a little bit, because I'm just like, if they really care about this guy, they would be like helping him out, right? Like getting him some help. They know something's wrong.
I think that's a really interesting like sign to, like, if you think about this game came out in the 90s, and
yeah,
I mean, even today, there's still stigma around mental health and things like therapy is a weakness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And for this game to come out and to be about basically, hey, y'all, get therapy for your trauma. Like, that is the theme of this game, I feel like was really interesting. So to see that still frustrated you in the remake, I mean, obviously they got to stick true to the source material to a point, but I also was upset by how many people wanted him, and he was just like oblivious to it all.
Yeah.
I was like, acknowledge somebody being horny about you, please, Cloud.
For the two people here that have played the original version of Final Fantasy VII and know why Cloud is acting the way that he is, like, did you find so many of his like episodes in this game to like just be kind of interminable to get through? Not in the sense of not being sympathetic towards Cloud, but being like, we know why this is happening, and I just wish that somebody would like actually just like intervene and be like, we need to like talk through what's going on, because that is something that I did experience myself playing through this game, is like knowing what's going on with Cloud, being like, man, like seeing that all these sort of incidents involving Cloud realized in, you know, full glorious HD and with such a greater frequency than in the original game, I just find it to get a little bit kind of grating over time.
Kyle, take it. Go for it.
So, thank you. I think it's really interesting. This is one of those things, kind of like you were saying, where I wonder how it comes across to people who have not played the original. I think they have actually handled this super well. I promise you, when you play the third part, or if you ever play the OG and you go back and play Remake and Rebirth, you are going to notice I mean, just about every time Cloud opens his mouth or Tifa is talking to him, you're going to notice some little thing, whether it's the inflection on the way that Tifa says something or something Cloud alludes to, that they don't make it obvious, but if you know what's going on, you know, well, I'm trying not to spoil things, but
I can't wait. I want to know.
There's a lot more going on as far as like why Cloud acts certain ways, why he doesn't acknowledge or can't acknowledge affection, why he can't remember certain people or certain things. That is extremely interesting, and I think that the performance and the directing on it for that voice actor is perfect. Like there are some of the voice actors in this that I like have some qualms with, but Cloud is just about as perfectly realized as you could get. And when he's being weird about something, or when he delivers a line strangely, I think it's intentional, because it's kind of that way in the original game too. Even though it's text, like he says bizarre things and he reacts strangely, and it sounds weird. And then that stuff, I won't spoil anything, but it eventually gets resolved, and you see where that plot line goes, and it makes a lot of sense in hindsight. So I think it's, at least for me, it's landed very well.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit for me, a reminder of the timeline. I played Final Fantasy VII for the first time when I was like 15. And then I didn't play anything Final Fantasy VII related until Final Fantasy VII Remake when I was 30. And so I had forgotten a lot of it. And then between those two, I went back and got the Platinum Trophy in Final Fantasy VII. So even playing Remake, having played the game 15 years prior, I was so frustrated with Cloud through Remake. And at the end, it was like, y'all, this game is great, but Cloud fucking sucks. He is a stick in the mud. He is he's emotionless. He doesn't acknowledge other people or their feelings at all. Cloud fucking sucks, but everything else about this game is awesome. And then I played the original again, got the Platinum Trophy right before this game came out. And I was like, oh, that's right. Now I have so much more empathy, and it doesn't bother me. It's like when you realize as an adult, it's like, you know what? Babies on planes are gonna cry, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's like, they hate it, their parents hate it, and it's not gonna do anyone any good for you to get upset about it. I kind of now feel the same way. Like, Cloud is that baby, and I have a better, more patient understanding for him, knowing that the baby has no control over themselves. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, I guess
Cloud
so.
being a baby.
I think it is one of those things where I think it will just be one of those things that I'll have to evaluate in context once we eventually get the third installment, really.
All right, so I want to stick on story a little bit, but Kyle, this might be a little bit me and you heavy segment, and maybe even Alex a little bit. But there were some significant changes from the source material in terms of like how things roll out, but also as kind of what Jerica mentioned, was like, was this in the original game? Was this whole mini game there? Was this character there? Like that kind of stuff. How do you feel about, we'll start with you, Kyle. How do you feel about the changes that they made for this game?
Okay, so when we start talking about story changes, there are at least a couple things from Remake and Rebirth before we get into that I want to make sure we're all on the same page on, because it's important. What do y'all understand, like, what the whispers were in the first game, in Remake?
I mean, I feel like I understood them a little bit better in Remake than I do in this game. I feel like my interpretation of whispers, well, maybe this isn't very helpful, but like I almost looked at them as like, this is a surrogate. The whispers are like a surrogate for Final Fantasy fans that would prefer that the remakes not be changed in any way, that they be as authentic as possible to the original source material. And now in this game, you have two different factions of whispers, and things get a lot more muddled, and I'm not as certain in my definition of them anymore.
I was just wondering if any of this is meta. Like, is this going to be something that we see, like, Kojima-ass stuff that happens in the storytelling of this game? Like, is I don't know,
you find out
president
everyone you've
of
been
Square
interacting with
Enix
online
is
has
gonna
been
show up
whispers.
and be
Yeah,
like-
they're the Whisperers.
Yeah, like, is
Whispers
it
of
just,
friends who
are
made
we,
along the way.
are we the Whispers? I don't know. Like,
So
I don't know.
I think from a meta perspective, yeah, you can definitely view them as like the fans who wanted a traditional remake. But from a in-world, like mechanical standpoint, the Whisperers actually change roles from remake to rebirth. In remake, they're called the Arbiters of Fate, and they're basically there to prevent the timeline from diverging from the remake. They want to make sure, or from the original, excuse me. They want to make sure the original game happens as it's supposed to. And you can see that they react anytime something deviates from the main story in a significant way. There's little touches added here and there, but anytime something significant changes or is about to change, they intervene.
is this like what's happening in Loki?
Oh, I
Is it
haven't seen the
similar?
new Loki
Sure.
yet.
Damn it.
Almost.
I don't
sure.
know.
Yeah. Kind of pruning the timeline. No, it's supposed to happen
Yeah.
this way a little
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
it's that. But at the end of remake, we defeat the Whispers, and that, of course, that sets us free from fate, and we can create our own future. Now, like, anything can happen, right? But there's
Kyle,
something
can I-
else that
can I clarify-
Oh, go ahead.
bit. I'm going to say this out loud as a question, but in the
Okay.
form of a statement.
Uh-oh.
The Whispers in remake are an agent, we've learned now, are an agent of Sephiroth, correct? Because they are the
Yes.
darker shaded Whispers. So it was really Sephiroth's will that we continue on the path of the original game? Oh.
No.
Okay.
They were originally the Arbiters of Fate, but at the end of remake, after we defeat the Whispers, Sephiroth absorbs them. You can see it in the cutscene. He actually basically sucks them into his sword, it looks like, but
Nice.
he absorbs all the Whispers. And in Rebirth, they don't try to keep things on that original path anymore, because they're not Arbiters of Fate anymore. They're basically agents of change. They are now working for Sephiroth. He is controlling them and trying to get things to happen the way he wants them to.
Okay, so they were
when you see them
agnostic
in the
before,
first game,
and now
Right.
they're aligned with. Okay,
when you see them in the first game, it's because something is changing and they're trying to stop it. When you see them in Rebirth, it's because Sephiroth is trying to change something.
Are these Whispers in every Final Fantasy universe story?
Never
Like,
been
are they
anywhere.
just, where did they come from?
Mm-mm.
they're brand new in remake.
They're brand new to
Mhm.
me in all aspects. They've never been in any other TV show or
Yeah.
movie.
But going to what your original question was, yeah, it's important to know that like they're there to keep things on the original path originally, but now they're here to disrupt that original path. I think the way they've handled this is really cool. The idea of a remake and marketing it as a remake, but actually no, remake means we're remaking this world and we're going to change it. And we're not going to let you know exactly what's going to happen. I think that is super interesting. I'm normally not one for like, anytime people are like introducing multiverses or timelines or things like that, I hate that stuff. But the way they've done it and like the subversion of those expectations has been handled so well here that I'm super into it. Although I could see someone who had a lot of nostalgia for it being frustrated by it.
Well, so this is what I want to ask, though. Do you still feel like that's true of this game when you consider the fact that the one big narrative difference that they could have made was not taken, which is saving Aerith?
Ooh, I can't answer that without spoiling some stuff in the original game, because her dying in the original game comes up again later. It's like there's a big plot through line there. But I'm okay with them keeping that the way it is, because I think they did something a lot more interesting than saving her. But we'll get to that when we talk about the ending.
Okay.
This game is like, I just want to say very quick, this game is so interesting to me because, like, the original Final Fantasy VII remake comes out. There's a lot of people going into that game. They're like, man, I really hope it just delivers on my memory of the original game and doesn't deviate so much of it from the original game's plot. And the Whispers in that game, again, very much feel like a stand-in for that kind of a fan. And then you get to this game where I feel like going into it, a lot of people were thinking, well, now they have the narrative license to potentially completely rewrite the plot of Final Fantasy VII and potentially undo a certain character's untimely death. And that ends up not happening. And it's so interesting because, like, if you didn't know anything about the people responsible for this game, you might look at this game and you might think, well, maybe the fans bullied the directors, the developers of this game into giving them a more traditionalist storyline. We've had news stories recently about how movie studios are recruiting super fan groups of people that will basically serve as tastemakers for the media that they're going to create going forward, which we'll see how well that goes. Or you might think, well, maybe like not fans, but like Square Enix corporate basically tugged on the leashes of the people involved in this game and are like, you have to make something a little bit more conventional. But like knowing like how strong the personalities are of the people involved in this game, again, invoking the name of Tetsuya Nomura again, like I know that the above two scenarios I described are most likely not true. That this story, the story of this game, is probably the story that they wanted to tell from the beginning, that there was probably no doubt in their mind that they were going to kill Aerith from the beginning, even with all this remake, rebirth, whisper shenanigans going on. And which just makes me so much more interested to see what they get into in part 3 and like ultimately like what was the purpose in the first place of introducing this idea of being able to break from faith when they can't, certain like set events are basically immovable.
And Chad, don't let me talk over everybody because I will. Okay, if you need to
It's
shut me
fine.
up,
You're the
just
only
tell me
one
to
who has
shut up.
answers. So.
Yeah, because like I don't even remember what we texted about when I beat the game, Kyle. Like I know I was
that was
texting
a
you with
fun
my
conversation,
thoughts.
though.
I don't remember. Like
So we'll not to get on the ending yet, but I think the reason that works, Alex, and then the reason that stays interesting is the original Final Fantasy VII lives and dies on its crazy plot twists. And there's like 10 of them. It's not like most stories where you have like one big central twist. No, Sephiroth burned down Cloud's home village and killed his mom. Aerith dies. Your main healer, your only healer, really, dies midway through the story. There are several others, some I won't want to spoil, but there's plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. You never see them coming. They're always these big dramatic reveals. And I think that what they were trying to do is give you that sense of uncertainty. Because when you're remaking a game like this, it's one thing to like recreate a scene and do it in these beautiful visuals that we have now. But I think they're trying to recreate that feeling in the original game of having something happen that's super unexpected. And the lack of the change and the ending is something we'll get to, because I actually think it's more interesting than just having them save Aerith this time. I think what they did is a lot more dramatic, actually, and what will happen, I think, will happen in the third game is going to be a lot more, a lot darker and a lot more interesting. But, anyways, yeah, I think that's why it still kind of works, is because it may not be this like super, in the big picture, it may be a pretty faithful recreation, but there are these changes that I think would normally make a lot of people mad, but because it gives you that same sense of like, uncertainty that the original game does, I think it kind of pulls on those same emotional strings.
I can't wait to talk about the ending.
When we revisit this in 4, 5, 7, 12 years when the third one is done, and we're gonna have 5 more mobile games to talk about too with more context.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think some of my favorite changes. One, I love that they had the freedom, obviously with new technology and modern game design and all that kind of stuff, to take, like, for instance, Gungaga, which was in the original game, it was like 5 low-res JPEGs.
Yes.
And it took you 5 minutes to experience everything that happened in Gungaga. And in this one, it literally, I spent like 20 hours in it. And granted, I was the kind of person who's like, I'm going to do everything I can in an area before I leave it. But still, to explore that kind of stuff in such a huge way, I think added a lot to what this world is right now. And then also allows them to, if they stick with the open world format, like, it's gonna add a lot of meat to the third part of this too, where you're going around in a bunch of different places and doing things. But I think one of my favorite story changes was from how the Black Materia got to Sephiroth in the original game to now this game.
Yeah.
I figured that was going to be a change.
Yeah. Correct me
Yeah,
if I'm remembering this
rough.
wrong. Yeah, the original game was like
It wouldn't go over well, I don't think, today.
Huh.
you had to pick someone in your party. It was like, we need someone, no matter what Cloud does, to hold on to the black materia and not do anything. So you give it to a party member, and then you get into this confrontation with Sephiroth, and they're like, oh, Cloud makes. I know I told you to hold on to it, but give it to him anyway. And you're like, are you sure? Yes, do it now. And then you hand over the black materia. And it's like, this was so much more impactful.
Well, actually, I think that's actually going to happen in the third part, because I think the part we see in this one, in the original game, Cloud jumps on Aerith and beats the shit out of her, like punches her in the face in the original game at the Temple of the Ancients. And that's how, or at least that's the first time Sephiroth tries to get the black materia. I was wondering if we were going to see a scene like that, and I was like, surely not, and they didn't. But yeah, that would have been interesting.
Yeah, that would have been tough.
Yeah.
That was just like a visually in this game, that part sitting over the open giant crater that used to be the temple. Just like, that was such a cool looking scene. I took so many screenshots.
Yes.
I told Jerica, I have 549 screenshots that we're cycling between back here. And that's just the good ones that I chose to save off of the PlayStation app. So there are so many more sitting on my PlayStation for no reason. This game's gorgeous.
Yay.
Speaking of the black materia, but also still speaking about changes from the original game, can we talk a little bit about one of my favorite sequences from the game, which was the Village of the Gi?
Speaking of new things that weren't in the original,
I may or may not have watched a few recap videos, and they definitely did not touch upon this sequence. So I was like, I guess this is entirely new.
It is.
Yeah, this very visually impressive. This was like, it very much, it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere coming off of Red 13's whole plot arc thing. But yeah, this was a really awesome sequence, and also interesting from a lore perspective that, I don't know if you remember, but the very first trailer we ever got for Final Fantasy VII Remake at E3 all those years ago, this probably would have been like E3 2015, if that sounds correct. Wow. The trailer is narrated by this one guy's voice who's like, and yes, the promise is at hand. Eventually we will look upon a dour sky. He's saying something to that extent. That guy's voice, that is Gi Natak, who is the guy that brings you to the Village of the Gi. Basically, he's talking... in essence, he's talking about the black materia and about it bringing the end of the world, which is what they're going for. When I put that together, it's like, oh wow, like they are really. I have
to go watch that trailer again.
Yeah, they were like really thinking far term in terms of like, like because like you would think that a trailer like that would be narrated by a character that is relevant to the plot of the original Final Fantasy VII, not a character that, as I understand it, in the original Final Fantasy VII is like a total like forgettable, like just one-off character you only encounter once.
I don't think you even literally see anyone from the Gi tribe in the original. Like, they're just referenced.
It's just a dungeon.
People talk about them and how, you know, in Cosmo Canyon, like they were defending against them, but we never see them. So it's really cool that they have that through line.
That's like a even in a space where they made a whole chapter about it.
Sorry, even a space where they're thinking, like, they revealed that in 2015, and at the time they're like, we don't know how many games this is going to be, but they still knew enough to say, we know this character's coming in the second part that you've never seen before, and they're going to voice this trailer. That's cool.
Yeah.
What about, let's talk about characters. There was a lot of character development in this one. Jerica or Alex, tell me about your thoughts as you learn more about Barrett or Aerith or Yuffie or these other side characters that we got a lot of little side quests to explore, or even Red 13.
I want to know more about Yuffie, right? Because you don't get too much. You just get a little bit, like, was it her brother or was it a boyfriend? I can't remember. Somebody had some kind of bad fate and she's like, you know, getting over that. You know, it's been months since I played. I finished earlier in the year. And then what came next was, or front of mine is Barrett's story was really good. It was cool to see like where go through his old town, revisit, I guess some of the reasons why he's the way he is. I was really confused throughout the whole game. Like, where is this little girl that he adopted at some point? I'm like, where is she? Who's taking care of her? And just the fact that it's been a few months since I played, is really hindering me because I feel like there's multiple timelines happening as well. So I'm like, did I remember that in the right order? I don't know. And I really can't remember off the top of my head, like how much further we explored Aerith's background, because I just know her mom, and we see that scene, and like I just don't know where she came from though. Was that answered, or is my memory just a little whack? Because it normally is. I just know they got to the city.
We know she's a Cetra, which is what they call we call them the Ancients. They call themselves the Cetra. And we did not see in the original, but we did see in this, like that point of her exploring around the city, asking people like, "Hey, can you help my mom? Can you help my mom?"
That made me sad. No one would help.
When you saw little baby Aerith, I was started tearing up, just like that poor little girl. But we did kind of like, we know that she was like, her mom died at that train stop. We knew that that's when what's her face
It's coming back to
picked her up and brought her back to that house.
There was
with all the flowers and
experiments
stuff.
happening, right? Like she was captive and she got away. Sorry, I'm like having to let y'all do more work. I'm like having to remember. There's something else with that, and I won't get into it. I'll let someone that has a little bit better, that's played a little bit more recently than I have. But with all the backstory and learning about who Zach is and how he plays a big part of this, I've always been interested in like who Zach is, and I did do homework on Zach before I played the game because I wanted to understand. I even asked Chad a few times, like, okay, can you explain this to me again? Like, who's Zach? Is he part of this like main story or not? I don't know. But it was really cool to see like how this game, I don't know, because Zach wasn't in the original game, right? Or was he?
Oh, he was.
He was, and I never even realized, like, he was in dialogue for sure. There was also a cutscene that I realized in both of my playthroughs, even the one for the Platinum Trophy, I missed the cutscene where you get introduced. Quest. Yeah, it's it's a missable side quest. And so, like,
kind of the key to understanding the whole game too.
I know, right? Right? I know, which makes so much sense why it didn't really, like, I still didn't have that empathy for Cloud and things like that in Remake because I missed that side quest in the first one. But yeah, Zach was not playable for sure in the original game. He was there, and then Crisis Core was like his backstory a little bit. And I played that on PSP, and I thought, like, oh, this is the first time we get to learn about Zach, not knowing that there was a ton of other content actually in the game that I just never saw. Yeah.
In terms of the characters of Final Fantasy VII, I do want to give a big commendation to Red 13, aka Nanaki, who, I liked him fine in the original Final Fantasy VII Remake, but they really do a lot with him in this game that really kind of endeared me to him as a character. That moment where, because we get throughout the game these initial teases of someone speaking to Aerith who you've never heard their voice before, and it's like, is this perhaps Zach speaking to Aerith through the multiverse? And the reveal, no, it's Red 13, and he's actually a child, was definitely unexpected, but they definitely employed that in a really great way in Chapter 10. And of course, his scene on the boat in Chapter 4.
Oh my
he
God.
gets in the soldier's uniform and he does a Zaboomafoo dance and plays the card game. Incredible. One of the best moments of the game.
I was so bummed out when I was playing, when we got on the ship and I saw everybody else and I saw Barrett in the uniform, and I knew, like, there's in the original game, there's just Red 13 on the dock of the deck of the ship, just walking around in this stupid ass polygonal suit, and I was like, oh man, they're really not going to do that in this game. And then when he shows up as the final contender in that tournament, I was like, yes, this is the perfect callback to this.
I do also want to say, and I want to preface this by saying, I did not like playing as him. I thought playing as him was not all that great. But Kate Sith, definitely a lot more charming than I was expecting. Here's the thing. If you show anyone a lineup of all the playable party members of Final Fantasy VII, I feel like 9 out of 10 times you ask them, like, what character of this lineup is like the most inscrutable? Like, which one can you not understand the most? I feel like they're going to probably point to Kate Sith because he's a weird cat dude with a megaphone that's standing on a giant Moogle that doesn't look like any Moogle you've ever known before. And I feel like they like moved heaven and earth to actually make him a likable, sympathetic character that you get. You kind of get his whole vibe of him just being this weirdo cat robot thing that, you know, has perhaps some nefarious intentions up his sleeve, but is genuinely trying to do good and wants to be liked by the people around him. So I do want to give him a shout out as well.
I'm excited for Yuffie and Kate Sith in particular because one, all of the backstory we know about both of those characters from the first game hasn't happened yet, really. Like the story we get about Yuffie and all of that kind of stuff, I think is made up for Intergrade, that little half episode between Remake and Rebirth.
Yeah.
And then like all the actual information from the original source material just hasn't happened yet in the game. So I'm like, that's having her character fleshed out a lot more and then seeing how they're going to tackle what's left given that context. I was like, I'm really curious about where that ends up for her. And then also, of course, Kate Sith.
It is a little disappointing. No feature spoilers, but it is a little disappointing that this game all but gives away who is controlling Kate Sith.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been, you know, if you're going into these games blind and don't know who's controlling him, like that would be such an incredible reveal in part 3, but I feel like it's kind of obvious now if you pay attention in the cutscenes.
They hint at it pretty hard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's almost impossible to not know. I think I'm as someone who knows, but yeah, it's kind of impossible to not know.
Yeah, there was a great
What's going on there, Jerica? You getting free water?
Yeah, she's getting
you getting refilled right there.
Wow.
Well, here, I'm gonna hold mine out to the side and see if anybody.
That was Audrey's hand.
I wish I had a bottle, but I don't have one right now.
Oh yeah. Got a fountain drink over there.
Nothing happened.
Oh man.
There was a great meme going around on Twitter shortly after the game released where someone posted a picture. It was like a text exchange between them and their girlfriend, and it was in the text exchange. It was a picture of the character that controls Kate Sith, and the person was like, "Oh man, I really wish that this guy was a party member in the game. I wish he was journeying around with Cloud and company." And the other person just responds like, "Sips tea." And it's like, "What do you know? What do you know?"
That's funny.
All right,
my favorite was
yeah. Go for it.
Sorry, good. Just quickly, one of my favorite things to watch was people were reacting to Kate Sith in Remake when he in the most dramatic moment of the game where the plate is falling and thousands of people are dying, and then you just no context see this little cat in a cape fall to his knees mourning. People who didn't play the original game reacting to that is hilarious.
Like, who's that?
Like, who the hell is this? It's so funny.
I was so interested in what the cat was going to be. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off, but I just remembered. I was like, I can't wait to see what this cat sounds like. Did not expect.
Oh, yeah. You hear that voice? Especially as that cat was not obviously voiced on the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
To then hear. Apparently the name is not pronounced Kate Sith.
It's Ketchi. Yeah.
Ketchi or something. It's like Celtic or Gaelic.
Yeah.
So that should have given it away, but.
Chad, I know you want to change topics, but real quick, earlier before we did the podcast, we were talking about the movie Advent Children. In the movie, there's a couple of brief lines of dialogue where you hear him talking in his Scottish accent, and I remember at the time thinking this must be a weird decision that someone made. He only has 2 lines of dialogue. Let's just give him a Scottish accent, not expecting. Oh no, this is canon that he is Scottish.
Canonically Scottish cat.
Yeah.
Apparently, Ketchi is a Scottish folklore thing.
Huh.
Oh.
It's a Scottish myth or something. I'm not super familiar with it.
I was gonna say there's a persona in the Persona series that I'm pretty sure is their own version of Kate Sith.
Oh, that makes sense.
But then for this, they double down on the name. All right, it's Kate Sith. We're gonna call it Kate Sith. Yeah. All right, let's talk about mini games, y'all. Because this game is basically you go from minigame to minigame to minigame, and even the story beats are minigames. What were your favorite minigames? What were the ones you speaking of ones you fucking hated the most? The Moogle thing was just on the screen. the fucking rounding up the Moogles every single time and getting worse and worse and worse and more Moogles. I wanted to fucking eat my controller. I was so frustrated. But tell me about your minigames. What did you like? What did you hate?
Hot take. I kind of like the Moogle one.
Really?
Yeah?
I did all of them. I enjoyed it. It was very weird and silly, but I liked it. I mean, Queen's Blood's the best, obviously.
Yeah.
That almost
Obviously.
doesn't count.
Yeah. Queen's Blood, hands down. The Moogle, I did do all the Moogle ones because I've gotten every single trophy except for now the hard mode trophy, which is why I spent 150 hours on this freaking game. But I did appreciate that as you get towards the harder ones, if you fail it, they're like, "Hey, do you want to just make this easier? It's not gonna have any negative benefit or negative side effects. We're just like, we'll just make it easier for you." It's like, I like that. Yeah, let's do that. Or even for some of the combat challenges, being able to say, you know what, let's put this to easy mode so I can get this done.
A cactuar thing.
Oh, that's the other one. That's the other one that almost made me eat my own eyeballs.
Yeah.
It was
which is
Yuffie.
the Cactuar one?
That's the one where you have the time trial in the desert region, and you have to like kill as many Cactuar to get enough points.
Like 150 or something.
Yeah,
Stupid.
And
I don't think I played that one.
The Yuffie ones, there's one of them you have to play for the story, but then you don't have to come back and play the other ones. But the Yuffie one was okay, but it was when you were playing with Aerith, who is so slow,
hard.
And she is. So, like, anytime she got hit, she's just like, "Oh, there go all my points." And that was the second one. I might not get the platinum trophy because of this stupid fucking Cactuar game.
I'd say, in terms of least favorite minigames, I couldn't really make heads or tails of the 3D brawler one. They introduced that one halfway through the game when you get to the golden saucer, and I was like, most of the other minigames over here, I got them just fine. This one I couldn't really figure out, so I didn't really engage with it a whole lot, even though, very cute, old school polygonal graphics and all.
Believe it or not, that little mini game with the boxers is actually more sensible, in the remake than the original. The original, it's like, it's a complete mystery what you're supposed to be doing.
Wow, really?
It's way worse.
I remember I actually I looked up like a way to figure out, like, I was like, some of these punches, I already have a hard time, if y'all didn't know, telling if something glows in the dark or not.
It's true.
So like, that's a story for another time. I can't see really well sometimes. And I couldn't tell how they were punching. I couldn't tell the difference. Like, was it this way or this way or this way? I'd like have to. I saw someone like on IGN, I think, say like if you pause the menu, you can like sort of predict, like you can see the type of move they're about to throw at you. I ended up doing that. I would pause it and help Audrey figure out how to punch because she never played any of this game, but she played that part because I was like, I can't do this. I'm gonna throw the controller. I was like, you do it. I'll pause it and try to help you figure out how to throw the moves. I don't know.
That's spoilers. That's the way to go for the entire 3D brawler thing, all the way up to, especially when you're fighting like Sephiroth is the last 3D brawler one that you end up like. It's impossible unless you pause it.
Made it to him, and honestly, like I was trying to 100% this game up until like the third area you get to. When I got to the beach area, or like maybe a little after that, I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do this. There's too much. I can't play this for the rest of my life. But anytime there's a card game, mini game in like card games, I'm always like, I'll never get into that. And every fucking time though, I get so into it. It ends up being my favorite thing and I can't stop. Like, why is it horrible memory? Roguelike card game. I'm obsessed with Inscription. Love it. One of my favorite games.
Incredible.
And then I saw Queen's Blood. I was like, oh, this looks so stupid. And then like I also was like, I'm not even gonna read how to play. It'll just make sense. I'm that good. I'll get it. And then I realized I was gonna have to read some rules because I'm like, I don't get this. And once I caught on though, like it got really engaging and fun, and I wanted to collect them all, like Pokemon cards. But yeah, like those are my two main memories from all the mini games, and all the other ones I could care less about. I just couldn't get into it. The stuff at the beach, the balls with the Red 13. I hated that so much. It was gross.
You didn't like the Fall Guys frog jumping minigame?
Oh man.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, I hated that too. It's just silly. I'm just like, I'll do this once. I just need to do it once and I'm good.
That's such a charming quest though.
It is. I love that minigame for just how like blatant it is of like, yeah, we remade Fall Guys, but you play as the frog form of your character from this game.
There's a trophy. I was so relieved when I was like, oh, there's no trophy related to the frog game, or at least doing all of the frog thing. And there's no trophy related to doing all of, whatever minigame. And then I found out there's a trophy for getting all of Johnny's decorations at his hotel thing.
Oh.
And there's one trophy for get all of Johnny's things. And then in all of Johnny's things, it's like, beat all the fucking frog levels, beat all the fucking Nanaki, Rocket League levels, beat all. And I was just like, oh my God, you tricky, stupid trophy list. I have to go back and do all. That's the Cactuar one too. Like there's no trophy for the Cactuar ones, but you have to get it for Johnny's.
God.
That's what broke me. The last like 50 hours of gameplay in this was just me going and doing all those mini games. And in fact, the final side quest after you beat the game is to become the ultimate party animal at the Golden Saucer 2, which is go beat all the mini games in Golden Saucer, not just on the expert level, but beat this one stupid Shinra guy's high scores on all of them and become the ultimate party animal. And I was just like,
but you did it.
I did it,
right?
I am the UAP.
Chad.
I'm the ultimate
more dedicated than I am.
I do want to give Chad credit because like I played and beat this game fairly shortly after it released. I only took me like 2-3 weeks. Chad was like sucking on this game like an everlasting gobstopper on the Respawn Aimfire podcast. Every single week he'd be like, yeah, I advanced a couple of feet in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm now within striking distance of Junon. And eventually, like after months and months of him doing this, he came on the podcast and was like, yeah, I basically completed everything in the game except for completing the chapters on hard difficulty. So like, good job on that. Good job. You did good work, Chad.
Yeah, I apologize. I told on the podcast, I was like, all right, y'all, we think we're going to do our review at like end of April, maybe. So if you want to be on the show, and here we are, October 13th. Finally getting around to it because I took so long to beat it. All right, we talked about 3D Brawler, but let's talk about real combat. Who were your go-to fighters? What were your general strategies?
I tended to Barrett is definitely one of my mains. And I would say probably, like, obviously aside from Cloud, like Yuffie and or Red 13 were probably like my third party member. I appreciated the utility of Yuffie being able to switch between a bunch of different elemental energy types on the fly, and controlling Barrett, I just find Barrett's arm cannon to be just very satisfying to control with the overcharge mechanic and all that associated stuff.
Jerica, what about you? I
used Tifa, Barrett, for the same reason as like his gun, and I just like Tifa's just fast and punches a lot of stuff. I always wanted Aerith nearby, but I just don't play with her at all. I don't use her at all. It's just so slow. She moves so slow, and like the healing stuff, I never got really great. Once again, the mana balls, I don't know. She needs some different ones. I don't know where to put them. I could get great at this, or I could just play on easy. I really enjoyed also playing with Red 13. He was fun. I just like always thought he was like, just a little animal zipping around, doing that Sidewinder move. That was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I stuck to the same, pretty much similar format in most fights. Unless it got a little tricky, then I got some help from the internet. But overall, that's who I rolled with.
Kyle, what about you?
So I would have Aerith was pretty much constantly in my party. She's a glass can in that game, and she can nuke things.
Dang it.
That was always there, and then I would rotate the others out. Usually Tifa, and then once I got Yuffie, I would rotate Yuffie and Aerith, depending on like what I was needing. Yeah, she can just nuke darn near anything in this game. Especially once you start leveling up the mana orbs.
Damn. Mana balls. Should have
Mana
done
balls,
that.
that's what it was. Yeah.
Damn,
Mana
I need to
balls,
know
yeah.
how to. Well, it might be too late now. I sure do wish I knew how to level her up.
She's dead
could
now. It's too late.
Be great.
I was
Damn.
all about like Yuffie was my anytime I could, Yuffie was my primary.
Yeah.
Like I even switched her to be the leader of the party
Nice.
because like I
She's
was saying,
so
like
good.
the elemental weaknesses was and then you get the doppelganger to do like, you know, have that second version of you doing everything again. And then I realized Cloud was always in my party. He was kind of my go-to if I got, you know, a situation where I couldn't control Yuffie. And then from there, it was basically everyone but... Actually, no. I didn't use Red 13 much because I'm not the, like, parry kind of person when it comes to video games, like timing the parry. And that was, like, the whole core of his skill. I feel like it was... You have to parry things in order to build up your meter. But yeah, Aerith was literally never used her if I had the chance. Like if Aerith was there and I had the option to not use her, that would be my choice, which made, of course, the Cactuar thing a lot more frustrating because I didn't understand all of her moves and all of that kind of shit. And then I learned after I beat the game and you had to start doing some of these Chadley, coming back to Chadley, who I didn't mind Chadley at all, aside from the occasional like, I would really like to move on, but you're chatting on this stupid gun in front of my face, doing your 3-frame animation that just loops. But then you have to do the hard mode Chadley things where you can't take them down and you have to fight as everyone and all of these combinations and take on like multiple summons at a time. And then I learned I knew nothing about the combat. And there's so much build crafting that you can do in this game by leveling up materia and getting the right items. And like there's an item that lets you break your 9,999 limit, which then you can do any amount of damage. And if you get like the right blizzard mana ball paired with like ice paired with absorbing an element so you can, you know, get mana from taking that damage. And then ice with all of these kinds of things. Like you can do 20, 30, 40, 50,000 damage with Aerith. And then there's this like, oh, use this Yuffie move that you put down an Aerith thing to get like, what is it, AB power? What do they call it in this game?
ATB, yeah.
Yeah.
ATB, yeah. So Aerith puts down an ATB ward, and then you go in there as Yuffie, and you do the stupid Moogle bouncing back and forth thing, and that like supercharges everyone else's ATB. So then Aerith can cast all of these spells, and you put Aerith in her own ward, which double casts her spells, and I realized I knew nothing about playing this game until I had to play the hard mode after the game, and now I'm like, holy shit. It reminded me, Jerica, of like when we talk about Destiny, and there was like the time before where we were like, this game is fun and we're playing it. And and then like you go to your first raid and you beat it and like, I don't know how we did that. And then we learned about mods.
Like, oh, we're supposed to equip those?
Oh, there are mods that like make my guns better or let me disrupt champions or like I can craft a build on this thing. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, this is a completely different game. And that's how I felt. When I discovered that
I bet
about
that's
this
really
game.
nice though. Maybe I'll go back once in a while because I've always wanted to understand how to be great at the game because I just haven't done the work to understand what's going on and how to play better. Probably because I haven't went through all Chadley's trials and he's trying to teach me how to play the game and I was like, bitch, no, I don't want to do it.
Here's the thing though, to get really good at it, you have to have all of this material leveled up, which means you have to go to this one area in Gungaga and just frickin' apply all the right things and just grind in this one little loop for like 2 hours to get all of your materia, get it all leveled up, and then you
just
can go
2 hours? Okay.
blow everything out of the water. It's wild. All right. We're at the point in this where in my thing I just have anything else? What else do we all have to talk about?
Can we talk about where this ends?
Yeah, let's talk about the ending. Go for it. I don't know.
I'm not done the worst one to start. Like, I don't know.
I think it's
I want to hear y'all.
We got to talk about the ending. Complete crickets.
Yeah, right. I
could tell you what I think. I mean,
I want to hear what everyone thinks happened.
I can't tell if Aerith is actually dead for sure. Like, did we actually see it happen? Help me remember. Like, I don't think we actually saw it happen. Maybe it's a memory.
You don't.
Like, has she figured out something new? Or is it just Sephiroth that's making all this happen? Sephiroth! I like to do that every time. And then where's Zach at? And that other guy that was dead in the last game, he died. And then I saw him. The other guy, part of
Biggs.
Yeah,
What's
Charlie
their group?
Sheen, Biggs, yeah.
Yeah, like there was other characters that I thought had died, and then now
He
they're
looks
back.
exactly like Charlie Sheen.
He really does.
So, yeah, there's a lot that weird date at the end that Cloud and Aerith go on. I was like, is this like what happens before she dies, or is she dead, or is she just? I don't know. Seems cool
that date
though.
is very interesting.
He still sees her, right? He's seeing her, but no one else is.
What about you guys? I want to hear what y'all say. Then I want to.
Alex, you go.
I hate being put on the spot for this. The thing that stood out to me the most about the ending is just how Cloud doesn't even really seem to ever fully register the fact that Aerith has perished. All the other characters seem fully aware of the fact that their companion has died, but at the end of the game, it's like, oh man, that guy, like, no realization has reached his brain of what just happened. And I am very fascinated to see where they go with that in the future. Because it's pretty obvious, like, correct me if I'm wrong, in the original Final Fantasy VII, it's very explicit that everyone acknowledges, yeah, Aerith is dead, but Cloud seems in this game to, like, for whatever reason, have just completely kind of glossed over it, partially because he gets flung into a million different multiverses where in some of them she's alive and she helps him beat Sephiroth at the kind of very end. And I'm assuming that probably ties into Sephiroth's overarching goal to basically consume Cloud's soul and take control of him so that he can basically enact his plot involving the light and the dark materia. I'm rambling a little bit, but that's all I've got right now.
It's pretty something. You did great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So my understanding is we have the original timeline, and we had the Fates keeping us in that timeline, and then we defeated the Fates at the end of Remake, and we've split, and now there are multiple timelines happening, some of which, like we see in the very, very beginning of the game, like one of the very first scenes, maybe the first scene, is this one where Sector 7 is collapsed and we see them bringing like a bunch of people are dead that we weren't expecting to be dead. But Zack is alive and Cloud is there, and Zack is bringing Cloud in. Hold on, am I getting this right? Zack is bringing Cloud's body in after Sector 7 is collapsed, which in the original timeline, like, Cloud is part of that journey, right? So there's all sorts of timelines now that are happening with different people alive, different things happening in different orders. And Sephiroth is trying to take all of, I don't know, if he like, I don't know, gets the black materia from all of these timelines, he can enact his goal on such a larger scale than he could originally, maybe. And so that's why we're like, Zack is fighting him in one timeline and Cloud is fighting him in another, because Sephiroth is somehow able to go between all of these or find some way to be in all of them at the same time as this giant, enormous monster somehow. And then you get to the last thing where, like, it's not a timeline, but Aerith has made almost like a spoilers for the end of Lost, almost like a Lost Purgatory thing, where it's like, hey, I'm dead, so I created this weird little alternate universe, not a timeline, but like this weird little pocket of reality where, like, I'm just going to ease you into it that I'm dead so that maybe it doesn't hit you as hard whenever you make that realization in real life. And that's that's where things got really, and were we in that the whole time? Every time we played as Zack, were we in that weird bubble, or was that something different? I don't know.
We know that one's separate because the stamp bag is different. So
yeah.
the stamp is what denotes which universe you're in or whatever.
Something that was very, so funny. I just want to say very quick, something that was very sinister but clever on the part of the developers is if you go back and play the original ending of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, not Rebirth, Remake, there are like multiple shots in that ending where you see people like looking up at the sky, and you see like this like golden light that's like coming through the room that Biggs has been put in after nearly sustaining life, threatening injuries. And you seem like, oh man, all these people have been saved. They're looking towards a brighter future. And then you get to this game and it's like, oh no, they're looking up at like a tear in time and space that's eventually going to consume them.
That,
yeah. Like it's like,
that's really cool.
Wow. They really they were setting up something incredibly dark that in the moment we couldn't have known.
So Kyle, tell us how we were all wrong.
No. So, well, that's the thing. You're not really wrong. There's a lot of ways you can interpret it, but let me pull up. I had some notes because I rewatched the ending today. Let's see. Yeah. So here's the crazy thing. Now, I do have to ask because I know, Jerica, you said that you had done your research on Zach.
Yes.
And Alex, you said you had done some, videos that like kind of summarize things. I'm not going to spoil anything, but before I say what I'm about to say, so that I don't spoil anything for you, I do need to know, like, what do you think happened with Zach in Nibelheim?
Could I say it?
Do you know, or do we need to let you get that reveal in the third game?
I feel like I know. They were together at some point. Like,
I'm not going to say anything. Just tell me.
Were they on a mission together in the past? Yeah. Is that okay for me to know?
Mm-hmm.
Is that... I don't think that's been made known to me. I think I've read that on the internet. So...
You're correct.
Okay. I will leave it at that. I don't want to mess up anything for anyone else.
Okay. So I'm going to be careful with how I say things here because I don't want to spoil a probably big reveal in the next game. You do know... So here's how Rebirth frames it. Rebirth frames it as they were on a mission together in Nibelheim because Cloud like starts to remember him when he gets there, right? And so as far as these first two games go, they were on a mission together, and Zach died, and Cloud like suppressed that memory because it was traumatic, right? Okay, we're gonna stick with that, and that's the truth. Okay, Cloud has done that before. Like he has basically suppressed a traumatic memory of someone dying. So that's in character for him. Now this is not in the original game, but what they've done with Aerith's death scene is basically make him go through that again. Someone close to him has died, and he is hallucinating his way through it. This is my interpretation of it, at least.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He is instantly suppressing and rewriting these memories so that he thinks that he saved her. And there are a couple things, actually several things I think that you can use as evidence for that. Let's see. Oh yeah. So when he thinks that he's deflected Sephiroth's sword, and then you see that green flash. That green flash we see a bunch throughout the game and throughout Remake when basically he's correcting a memory so that it doesn't traumatize him again. In the first game, when Aerith mentions Zack by name, instead of hearing it, that green flash happens, he gets a migraine, tinnitus effect, the whole 9 yards. That's like a protective mechanism for him. Because whenever Zack's brought up, he can't handle it. He blacks out, he's filtering that information. There are a couple other events that cause that, but that's a pretty well-established trope in these two games. The same thing happens when he tries to deflect Sephiroth's sword. He does it. He does kill Aerith. Sephiroth kills Aerith. Cloud is struggling. We see him flashing back and forth between these possible endings where you see what's actually happening, which is Aerith dies and Cloud's mourning, and you actually see him mouthing the words to the speech he gives in the original game, talking about Aerith, and basically he gives essentially a funeral speech right there as she's dead, laying there dead. He's saying that words in the flashback. We don't hear it in Rebirth because he's erasing those memories and suppressing them. When he looks down, I watched this again today to make sure I wasn't crazy because Jerica, I think we talked about this a little bit. When he is holding her, he looks down and sees her eyes open, which is a surprise to us, right? Because she looks fine. She's staring at him kind of blankly. And she puts her hand up on his face and like holds his cheek. When that happens, you get an immediate cut to the rest of the party arriving on the scene. And when they look at Cloud is holding her hand against his face. And they immediately, you can't see her face, but she's just lying there motionless. And he's holding her hand up to his face, and they immediately recognize that she's dead and charge after Sephiroth. Which is an absolutely wild way to handle this, in my opinion. Because instead of us getting to process this, like we're all expecting this big moment where we're going to finally get to see this famous, like iconic scene get reenacted in this game with these amazing visuals. And that kind of gets robbed from us. And I think that kind of comes back too to this idea that they're trying to recreate these feelings from the original game. Not necessarily recreate the moments beat for beat, but give us that same sense of like loss and that unexpected, like having the rug pulled out from under you. Because it's not just this scene that's changed. There's an entire, like pretty lengthy missing scene that is just as iconic, where Cloud carries Aerith's body out into that pool, and like they have a funeral for her, and he lets her drift off into that water, and she like floats down while they're all watching. That doesn't happen in this game because Cloud doesn't think that she's dead. He's like hallucinating that she's still there and talking to them.
Do you think that the final, like the very last confrontation with Sephiroth at the end of the game, like I assumed initially during that confrontation that, oh, this is just another Aerith in the multiverse in a timeline where she survived. But now, are you implying that she's probably not? Oh, so you think that is another multiverse Aerith?
There's a couple things happening. So Aerith, I do think, is able to go through these different timelines. And so she does. I do think that's her coming and fighting alongside Cloud there. And the reason is because Sephiroth talks to her. He's actually saying things to her. He's like saying, "Be gone.
That's fair.
Your role is played, or your role is finished, or whatever." But there's another really interesting thing that I think kind of confirms which parts are the real Aerith and which parts are his hallucinations too. And it's actually in the end credits, interestingly enough. But as we see her die, and we see these like weird discrepancies between what Cloud is seeing and what the party's seeing, one of the most like damning pieces of evidence, in my opinion, to this is the Genova fight. So in the original game, you fight Genova after Sephiroth kills Aerith, and everyone's got a maxed out limit break. Now, in the original game, the limit breaks represent people being past their limit, right? But it specifically will charge automatically if your character's enraged. Enraged is a status effect in the original game, right? And in that fight in the original game, everyone gets full limit breaks at the beginning of the fight. Same thing happens here, except for Cloud. Cloud's limit break is empty because he is not grieving her. He doesn't think that she's gone. He says, he basically says, "Yeah, I'll be right back. Let me deal with this guy," and then goes to join the fight. But everyone else knows what's going on. They've seen what's happened. And so their limit breaks are already full. But Cloud's will always be empty at the beginning of that fight, in Rebirth at least. And then in the credits have this thing where they show slide shots, or like a slideshow of screenshots from the game, right? There's a gap. The way it's going is like there's screenshot after screenshot. They're like slightly overlapping each other. When you get to the end of the, like as it's recapping everything through the credits, when you get to the end, everything after that final fight with Sephiroth, until the Bronco flies off, so everything where, she appears in that like dark pool room and says like, "Come on, let's go." Everything that she says to him at the tiny Bronco when they're getting ready to like fly off for the ending, all that's missing. It doesn't just skip to the picture of the end where they're actually flying off in the sky. It's actually, the slideshow stops. It's just blank. It's just black screen, and then it picks up again when they're flying off. All of those scenes where he, in my opinion at least, is hallucinating her are just like mysteriously taken out.
I got goosebumps
really
like 16 times in the last 5 minutes while you were talking.
So deep.
It's so
very
crazy.
informative. Yeah.
This is gonna be insane. Like when I think they're trying to figure out a way to make this as a little bit. They want us to feel the emotion again if you played and experienced that. Like I just can't
you're
wait.
Looking forward to that scene.
I can't wait to see when he does figure it out. Like when he remembers. Oh God.
Oh,
can make me cry. I don't even know how they're gonna do it. I'm gonna cry. Finally,
I think that's where they're gonna have so much change in that third section. Because Tifa's already like extremely suspicious of him. She's acting weird. Everyone realized that Cloud is off his rocker. You can see it in the way they treat him at the end. Like he's acting like everything is fine. Aerith's just like, yeah, she's hanging out here. She's doing her thing. We're gonna go on ahead. And everyone's like, this guy's messed up. He's completely lost it. And I do think that's going to be interesting in the next game, like how they handle Cloud's delusions there.
Do we think, and I'm joking, but I'm also half not joking, in the same way that Cloud inherited the Buster Sword from Zack, is he going to inherit Aerith's healing rod and also become the dual role of the group healer?
I don't think so.
Do we think though, like maybe not that exact scenario, but do you think that they're going to find a way to keep Aerith around in the party, in the combat, not as a character interacting with the other characters, but at least in some sort of active role in the game? Or do you think that she's truly finito?
I do think so, because in the original, they're very faithful, like which weapons you get and like which limit breaks you get in this game. You should have unlocked at this point in the original game Aerith's final weapon and her ultimate limit break, because she doesn't stay with the party, she dies, and so you actually get her ultimate weapon and the ultimate limit break right before she dies in the original. She doesn't get any of that end-game gear for her in this. And so I wonder if they're saving that for the third one and we'll have her in there somehow. I don't know how that's going to work, but I definitely think that she is gone and Cloud's just bugging out about it.
That's one thing so that interesting, because I hadn't put together that she doesn't have her final stuff, but I just assumed the reason they ended the game here, aside from it being like a narrative, like even in the original game, it was like, cool, she dies, switch to disc 2. I
so
figured
we can
snowboard. No future spoilers.
I figured they ended it here with Rebirth because, like, mechanically, it would be a nice, like, all right, you learn how to play Aerith. She's here in your party. Combat is simple. It makes sense from beginning to end. It's consistent. And then we start a new game. Combat's different now. You're not relying on her for magic and healing, and we have other characters that we're going to have take her spot. But to think that she might still be around in some playable capacity, like that complicates things.
I wonder how they'll do that. Like if she'll have sequences with Cloud, like where it's just those two, and they're off doing their own thing. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Cloud gets kicked out of the group and is kind of on his own with Ghost Aerith or whatever for a little bit. I think that would be interesting.
I wrote this in my own notes. I would not be surprised if, in the same way that this game has the Zack interstitials where you play Zack for like a few minutes at a time, they do something very similar in the third game where you're playing as Aerith, possibly traversing the multiverse or the live stream or something like that. But the only issue with that possibility is that would also not really put her in proximity with the party. Like that wouldn't really involve her a lot in the gameplay. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do with her in part 3.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be, I want to know how they handle that.
I'm also interested, I'll just say very quickly, like wrapping up my thoughts and hopes for the future, I'm really interested in seeing what they do with Geen Attack and the Gi tribe. Like I said earlier, that was definitely one of my big surprises of the game, really loving that segment, really loving all the new lore we learned about the Gi tribe and their involvement in the kind of central predicament of the game, and it's going to be interesting to see how much they do or don't touch upon them again in part 3, because we know that they want that black materia back at some point. Definitely interested as well in seeing what they do at Yuffie's hometown, home place, because we know, like, I'm not trying to get into future spoilers, but we do know from interviews that is one thing that they've talked about part 3. One thing we know definitively is that part 3 will heavily involve us exploring Yuffie's home village and everything going on there. Yeah. So that's definitely something to look forward to.
I think what's particularly interesting about Nanaki is that I can't remember if this is at the end of an optional side quest or whether it is at the end of something you play in the story, but like he makes a promise to the Gi people. He's like, I'm going to get you what you're asking for. And
which is crazy.
Like, that is the end of his thing with it. It's like, I'm going to do it. I'm a man of my word. I promise I'm going to do it. And then he goes back to the party and they're like, how are you going to follow through on that party? You're not going to obviously give them the black materia and let them end the world. And he's like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I have to. I told him I would. And I was like,
that's wild.
How's that going to end? But then I think another thing that I like so much about this game too, when you're talking about Yuffie, like, and exploring her stuff, is that I really love the way that they put her into this so that we can explore a lot of her backstory, because she was an optional character in the first game, in the original game. And in fact, I didn't even know she was a character. I didn't even know she was a thing until, like a year and a half ago when I started thinking about playing the PlayStation. I was like, I mean, there's this woman this whole time that I could have had in my party that I thought was just some random character I ran into in the woods and fought. So the fact that they're like completely building her out and now apparently is going to be a huge part of the third game, like that's super cool to me to see that change.
Yeah, I missed her my first time through too.
One last thing I actually wanted to ask Jerica is, as somebody here who's played Final Fantasy X, did you notice / appreciate any of the Final Fantasy X references that we got into, especially once we got into like the final act of the game?
I'm going to be honest, it's been so long since I've played. If they were there, I probably saw it and I was like, that's cool, but I don't remember. Can you help me remember?
So I've never played Final Fantasy X, so this is me more going off of people on Twitter talking about it, but they're like, yeah, apparently like when Aerith is doing like her various like spell weaving in like the final dungeon of the game, apparently that stuff is like very analogous to what what's her face is doing in Final Fantasy X.
Yeah. Yuna, is that her
Yuna?
name?
Yeah,
with their
Yuna.
Staff.
Yeah.
Getting rid of sin. I can't remember. That's been a long time too, but I can see that.
I don't know if Chad has any insight into this or.
I don't know.
There was Blitzball. I missed that. That could have been a mini game. They missed out on that.
I don't know. All right, now we'll get to the last question again one more time. Anything else?
I do want to talk about one last thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I had forgotten about it, but you brought up the date they go on.
Yeah.
Toward the end. We're in that like alternate universe. I thought it was really interesting that on that it's kind of like a bit of fan service too, because like everyone is always disappointed in the original game, like they never get to go on that date that they say they're going to go on. So letting them kind of have that like goodbye moment is really nice. But I thought it was really interesting that when you make the choices on the date, like you go up to a vendor and they're like, which flower are you gonna buy for me, or which or whatever it is, I can't remember exactly.
It was like a hair clip
that
or something.
No matter
like that.
what, hair clip, that's what it is, and then some candy or something. No matter what you pick, they pull out something else and give that to her instead. And I've seen some people talk about it before, but I can't help but wonder if that is supposed to be Aerith, like kind of easing him into this idea that like you're not really in control. You are not like just because we broke fate doesn't mean that you get to decide what's going to happen. Like what's going to happen is going to happen, and it doesn't really matter what choice you make. Things are still kind of set in stone. And then when you go to try to save her at the end, if I remember correctly, what's pushing you back, or not, what is it? Maybe not at the very last moment, but at some point the white whispers, which I think are pretty heavily implied to be like, Aerith's will versus Sephiroth's will.
Yeah.
They actually hinder you too. They kind of help ensure that she dies, and that she kind of plays that role, because that's her fate. And Chad will know probably, without spoiling anything, but like, her dying is something that needs to happen, and so no one else realizes that, but I think Aerith does realize that throughout the game. And she's like, this is going to have to happen whether you want it to or whether you choose to or not. I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting idea.
Man, is it right that when I was playing, I was trying to romance Tifa? Now I feel like an asshole because it should have been Aerith, right? Is it? I don't know.
There's no wrong choices. No wrong choices.
There's no wrong choices, but it feels bad. It felt bad at the end. I was like, well, Jesus.
You rejected her and didn't save her.
I would say you and probably 95% of the human population also was going after Tifa for many very big, obvious reasons.
That is actually a good last minute question, though. Earlier in our conversation, I talked about how I got Red 13 on my date at the Gold Saucer. Did I say that? Well, I'm saying it now.
Oh, no. Nice.
Yeah, I'm curious. Who did you guys get as like your first date option?
I worked really hard for Tifa. I did all her missions, and I tried not. Aerith still liked everything I was doing. I was like, God dang it!
She's so easy to please.
Even Barrett was starting to get, I guess, a little warm on me. Like, I'm like, okay, bruh, okay. But yeah, it was Tifa.
I played it like without trying to influence it necessarily any one way or the other, and I got Tifa. And then after you beat the game, you can actually go back in the settings and you can say, hey, I want to skip to this chapter and I want, all of the side quests to be done. And then also I want Barrett to have the date, or I want Yuffie to have the date. Like, you can actually pick that in a menu. And I wanted to go back because it was the very last trophy in the original game. I wanted to go back and was like, what does this date with Barrett look like? And it was such a pain in the ass to get it in the original game. I was like, all right, let me see what this looks like. Yeah, it was a nice little moment. And then I did it with Yuffie too, just because like, is he going to kiss this little child?
Wait a minute.
So wait, did you have it with Barrett as your first time, or?
And Tifa was my first time.
Okay.
And then I went back afterwards and was like, let me see it as Barrett. And then I saw it as Yuffie as well.
Got it. Kyle, what about you?
It was Aerith. I wanted to do Aerith because of the story reasons.
Makes sense.
I feel like it just flowed better.
I want to do that.
There's really no wrong. There's no wrong.
It felt wrong. I felt like that's not what's supposed to happen. But everybody's like, go for Tifa. It's fine. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like at the end, Cloud and Aerith are meant to be. Felt sort of shitty going on that date now. Now we're in the afterlife on a date.
Yeah,
awkward.
You still win on one.
Anyhow.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for doing this. What is almost 2 hours of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth chat? I can't wait for 3-4 years for us.
What's it going to be called?
Doing this again.
Retribution.
What's it going to be called? It's got to be something with an R.
Retribution. Revengeance.
Revengeance of the Sith. The Kate
Rebirth
Sith.
make.
Rebirth make. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remake the baby and birth it again.
Will this one be as big as this game? Like, I feel like this
Bigger,
game's massive.
I think it's bigger.
If it's like the last third of the original game, it's actually I won't spoil anything, but it's gonna blow your mind. If they keep in all the stuff that you do at the end of FF7, it will put the other two to shame as far as scale goes. Quality, we'll see.
Final
But
Fantasy.
I think also in terms of like, it'll be bigger, but I don't think we're gonna have like all the mini games that we had in this one. I don't think I think it's gonna be a lot more focused in terms of storytelling.
Okay.
It'll have to be if they want to keep the scale the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's gonna be wild how big and how much you can do.
I can't
I
wait.
hope.
Yeah.
I can't wait now.
Final Fantasy
I wish I didn't know this.
Final Fantasy VII Reese's Peanut Butter Cup.
Yeah.
It's going to be called
God.
that.
Yeah, love it. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, if you are listening to this on JK Games, I'm Chad Michael Ennis, and we have Alex Cozina here.
Please.
We're both from Respawning Fire, and we have a regular weekly show that we do, along with other episodes. Like we have a BARF episode, Backlog Accomplishment with Respawn and Friends, where we play either games from our backlog or classic games you should have played, or in some cases, Cozy makes us play literally the worst games on the planet for no reason at all, and we might rescind his ability to let him choose games.
Kyle, Jerica, have you ever played Plumbers Don't Wear Ties?
Don't.
I looked it up after I heard y'all talking about it. I was like, no, I'm not.
Don't spend money on it. Don't waste time on it. Don't waste brain power on it.
I saw that episode you did on it, or I didn't watch it yet, but I saw it. I was like, oh, I'll save that for later. I'll see what these guys are all about.
0 to 10.
Do I need to play the game first?
I mean,
don't play
100%.
Watch a 45-minute YouTube video
the episode
in the background. Don't watch it.
I will say, all jokes aside, I did not. I'll get into it on the podcast. I did not enjoy the remaster that they did of Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. I thought it was lacking in a few areas. So I would say, for that reason, yes, probably just rely on a YouTube walkthrough.
You can also just watch our podcast and still
Plumbers
enjoy
Don't
it,
Wear Ties.
even having not played the game.
Is this like an old game?
It's a 3DO game.
From the 90s.
Yeah.
The early 90s.
Yeah.
So weird.
And it is live action photos set to audio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. Okay.
Don't play it. Just watch
I'm gonna look it up.
But speaking of, so we've also, for those of you who are listening on Respawn Aim Fire, thank you, Jerica Hannah from JK Games. Plug a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, JK Games. Check it out. Me and Kayla host. Eventually, we're going to be every week. Talking about gaming news and reviews and movies and stuff. I'm making her watch Arcade. Also making Chad watch it occasionally. We'll be talking about that soon. And by the end of the month, we are going to play a game called Don't Scream, just to see like how long we can go without screaming. Apparently it's scary. You're walking through the woods. I love found footage horror movies, so like I can't wait to actually play that. But yeah, you should join us sometime. JK Games Podcast.
Love it. And Kyle Cosper, thank you so much for lending your Final Fantasy VII Rebirth knowledge to this, and
thank you for having me.
Also,
involved.
yeah, Kyle's in our fantasy league. That's how we are in another group chat where we talk about all these other games in this other chat. But Kyle, 2-time winner, right?
Oh, one time.
One time. Okay.
I was the first though, so
Cody Crumb Dog
Count for
Millionaires
something.
beat me twice, I think.
Yep.
Anyways.
Love it. Wait, what was the name of the studio or the publisher? Slumdog Millionaires. Is that what you said?
Crumb Dog Millionaire. I don't think that's this time, but I call him that anyways. That's his nickname.
Love it. Love it. All right. So thank you both for joining us. We'll see you again in a few years.
Yeah. Look forward to it. Bye.
I can't wait.
Take care, folks.